Hello and welcome to the channel. I am here for another album review for you guys. Now, for this review, I'm going to be reviewing another album from In Flames. And yeah, I guess I've just been kind of in the mood to talk about In Flames lately, so I thought it would be interesting to talk about this album in particular. Because this album was actually my introduction to In Flames, or at least the first album that I've heard from them in full. And the album I am talking about is Sounds of a Playground Fading from In Flames. I know some people might say that this is not a very good start when getting into In Flames. Some people might say, hey, Zach, you should have started out with their 90s work, which I agree. I definitely agree. I do wish I would have started out with In Flames' previous material from the 90s, of course. But the question does remain, though, like if I were to get into the band as a whole, if I did start out with their 90s work, because you have to remember at this point, whenever I got into In Flames, I was, just now stepping on the Melodeath ground, I guess you could say. Like, I had very little exposure to Melodeath at this point. The only band that I was listening to before I got into In Flames and Melodeath was Soilwork. And Soilwork, they are a pretty accessible band. They have a lot of melody, especially in their recent material. In their recent material, they have a lot of clean singing, of course. So, yeah, that's why I wondered if I were to get into the band still, if I did start out with their 90s work. So, I guess that's one of the things that makes newer In Flames, pretty unique. I will say that, they can pull people in when getting into Melodeath, like maybe fans of Breaking Benjamin, 3 Days Grace, or Red, or, bands of that variety. If they go to listen to In Flames and like their more modern albums, they might say, I really like this band. And then they eventually get into the 90s material, their Melodeath stuff, and then eventually discover more Melodeath bands and become a fan of more bands in metal as a whole, because that'll open many gateways for them. So I guess in that sense, I can't, bash the newer In Flames too much, but I think a lot of people can agree that the main problem with newer In Flames albums is they're pretty generic in comparison to the Melodeath era of In Flames. I think most In Flames fans can agree that the old stuff is just better. And I think, obviously, because these were originators, they started out as Melodeath. So, yeah, so I do have a soft spot for this album, considering it was my first In Flames album. And even putting the bias and maybe nostalgia aside, because maybe some people might say, well, maybe you like the album because it was your first. Maybe it's because of nostalgia or something. But I would actually say it's more than just that. I think the reason that this album is good is because I feel like this album combines their new sound in with their 90s work. Like, you can definitely hear, some of that, the 90s In Flames elements in this album for sure. You can definitely hear it with the instrumentation. Maybe not so much with the vocals, but I'm mainly referring to the instrumentation here. So let's go ahead and talk about these tracks. We got the title track, Sounds of a Playground Fading, which is the opening track. This song has never been one of my favorites, but it's not bad, though. I think it's a pretty decent album opener. And then we got Deliver Us, which is one of the lead singles. This song is pretty accessible. It's pretty catchy. I think fans of modern hard rock would really dig this song. It's kind of... it's a pretty accessible track, pretty radio-friendly, Maybe a song that, you would maybe see played on, like, mainstream rock radio or something like that. And then we got All For Me, which is not one of my favorites as well. It's a decent song. I think it's got some unique instrumentation, especially with the guitar work. The melodies are interesting, but it just overall is not one of my favorites. And then we got The Puzzle, which is one of the heaviest tracks on the album, I'd say. It's got these hard-hitting riffs, and, the whole band, does a really good job with this track in particular. I think this song is actually kind of overlooked. It might be one of my favorites on the album. And then we got Fear's the Weakness, which is, I think, an underrated In Flames song for sure. I don't know what it is about this song. I think it's just the intriguing melodies and the guitar work. It just is a very well-made song, and I really like Anders' vocals in this song. I mean, he does sound like he's giving it his all in this song. It's a really great one, and maybe another one of my favorites on the album. And then we got Where the Dead Ships Dwell, which is another single off the album, and probably another favorite of mine as well. I really dig this song. Like with Fear is the Weakness, I really like the guitar work in this song. I mean, the guitar work throughout this album in general really does take the spotlight here. I mean, that's one of those things that I just noticed. Like, this, I feel like, has some of the best guitar work in any In Flames album, at least for a good while. I mean, since the 90s, I'd say. But yeah, this is definitely a great song. And then we got The Attic, which is a pretty interesting song. This is definitely the most unique song on the album. They kind of take a break from all the heaviness, and then they go like so eerie on this song. Like, it's a very haunting and eerie sounding song, you know, within the lyrics and the instrumentation. It's just very, very eerie sounding. Definitely has a kind of a scary song, to be honest. It's pretty unique though. I actually really like this one. And then we got Darker Times, which is pretty good. Not one of my favorites, but I think it's got some intriguing melodies to it. And then we got Ropes, which I know is a fan favorite from this album. At least I think it is. If it's not a favorite of mine, it's at least an honorable mention. And then we got Enter Tragedy, which is, again, not one of my favorites. There's not much to say about this one, but it's not bad. And then we got Jester's Door, which is just an interlude. Kind of similar to The Attic. This kind of sounds like it could be like, the sequel to The Attic from this album. I think this is a pretty unique interlude. It's also pretty haunting, pretty freaky sounding. I mean, it's pretty cool, actually. And then we got A New Dawn, which is, I think, one of In Flames' most underrated songs. I don't know how this song is not getting a lot of recognition. I think this song is incredibly unique. It really is, especially with the way the song is structured and how one thing leads to the next. I mean, you even got some violin sections in there. I really like the violin part that's in the song, like that little break that's in this song. I think that's a really unique part of the song. And Anders himself, he sounds really good in this song. I mean, he does a good job with his vocal delivery in that song, and I think it's easily one of the best songs on the album. Like I said, I think it's pretty underrated. And then we got the closing track, Liberation, which is maybe my least favorite song on the album. This song is nothing special. Never been crazy about this one, but I don't know. It's an okay album closer. Now, is it bad? No, it's just maybe my least favorite on the album. It's just nothing worth writing home about, I guess. This song is kind of like, I feel like this song is kind of like a little tease of what's to come with the album to come after, Siren Charms, unfortunately. But I think it's a little bit better than most of Siren Charms anyway. But yeah, that's my review for Sounds of a Playground Fading by In Flames. I do think it is a solid album for the most part. There are some skippable tracks on here, some tracks that honestly are kind of filler. There's 13 tracks on here. You could easily cut out maybe 2 or 3 tracks on this album. But I think it's a solid album for the most part, and I do think that this is In Flames' best album, maybe either since Clayman or Reroute to Remain. I know that's maybe a controversial thing to say in the In Flames fan base, because I do know that there are some people that don't like this album. They say that it's one of their weakest albums, but if you are one of those people that say that this is one of In Flames' worst albums, I would definitely encourage you to give it another chance. I mean, go into it with an open mind. You know, like I said, this album I feel like does combine a lot of their 90s element in with their more modern sound. I think it's a good album for the most part. Now, sure, it's not one of their best. It's definitely not in the top 5 In Flames albums or anything, but I still think it's a very good album, though. It's a pretty underrated album, too, I think. I mean, I'd probably say it's one of In Flames' most underrated album, if not their most underrated album. Definitely an album that doesn't get enough attention from fans, and in my opinion, this was the last solid In Flames album. Now, I the Mask had some good stuff on it, but the replay value is not the strongest, and it's an album that really fell off for me. But I do think that this album, Sounds of a Playground Fading, was really the last solid album, like the last one where, you can enjoy it all the way through. I think it's a really good album, so as a score, I'll have to give this album probably either an 8 or an 8.5 out of 10. I do think that this is the best of their modern era, and I think it's a really good album. Like I said, not one of their best, but it's still a good album still. So let me know what you guys think of this album. Do you guys also agree that this album is overhated and underrated as well? So let me know some of your favorite tracks on the album and all that good stuff. So let me know what you guys think of this album. So thanks for watching. Have a nice day and take care.